Welcome viewers. In this lecture, I will be discussing about how organizations manage evolution. During the phases of evolution, organizations transform from birth, growth, decline and death. So, we will be discussing about what are the reasons why organizations look for growth and various phases of organizational growth. There are prominently 5 phases of organizational growth. Then define why organizations decline. We will also discuss about the environmental factors or forces that might precipitate organizations to decline. So, introducing the concept, as we have seen, organizations often experience a life cycle of rapid growth through expansion of market or by innovating new products, coming up with new ideas and services which have been followed by a rapid expansion, and further the organizations face a fierce competitive market where many similar kind of products and offerings are available. So, because of which the organizations are not able to sustain and they meet decline due to market shift or poor management due to some internal issues, internal turmoil. So, this requires organizations to adopt survival strategies like restructuring, cost cutting, diversification, downsizing and so on. I will be citing certain examples from Toyota and Lehman Brothers. Toyota's global expansion or of growth strategy due to Lehman Brothers collapse or decline. These examples give us various phases of growth decline. Growth is a phase where companies often grow through market expansion by offering new products, diversifying their products and venturing into new geographical market or merger and acquisition. Toyota has utilized Toyota production systems to achieve operational excellence, followed by global expansion strategy and product diversification to become market leader. Similarly, if you look at another example of Lehman Brothers represents a dramatic failure due to leveraging over leveraging or poor risk management, failure to adapt to shifting market conditions in 2008. Decline is characterized by falling sales, reduced market share and inability to innovate, create, or often resulting from rigid hierarchical structure or outdated business models. What are the strategies for survival? When facing decline, organizations need to change their existing strategies in order to survive and sustain. So, these strategies can be restructuring, strategic change, customer centric focus or financial discipline or innovation. Restructuring is cost cutting initiative and negotiating with suppliers to improve cash flow. Strategic change, reconfiguring external networks, exploring new products and exploiting intangible assets in order to adapt to industrial change. Customer centric or customer focused approach is nurturing existing customer base, improving to retain the customers, existing customers rather than focusing solely on acquiring new ones. Financial discipline, actively monitoring the cash flow, increasing cash reserves and reducing debt. Innovation strategy is investing in research and development to create new products to address current market demands. I would be citing examples of Nokia during the organizational growth and decline phase. Nokia began as a paper mill and diversified into rubber and cables before focusing on telecommunication in 1990s. So, the journey or the growth phase or the dominant phase of Nokia was 1865 to 2007. During expansion under CEO Jorma Olila, Nokia abandoned non-core businesses to become a specialized mobile phone giant. By 2007, Nokia held over 40% of the global market share, becoming the world's largest mobile phone manufacturer. Decline phase, the smartphone saw the disruption during 2007 to 2013. The launch of iPhone and Android triggered a rapid collapse as Nokia failed to adapt to software-centric ecosystem, and a bureaucratic culture and fear-driven internal politics stifled innovation and delayed decision making, which has led to internal rift or inertia. And Nokia also clung to its outdated operating system, later made an unsuccessful pivot to Windows Phone. which lacked a competitive app ecosystem. So, these were some strategic steps which led to the decline of Nokia. A market share plummeted to roughly 1% by 2015, leading to the sale of its mobile division to Microsoft in 2013. During the third phase, Nokia utilized specific strategies to maintain its viability, divested in its falling consumer phone business to focus on telecommunication infrastructure like 5G network and Internet of Things, acquiring Alcatel Lucent to gain scale. It leveraged its massive portfolio of intellectual property and patents to generate steady licensing revenue. Nokia licensed its brand to HMD Global to maintain a presence in the smartphone market without the heavy cost of manufacturing. During its decline phase, Nokia closed several manufacturing plants and research and development centers to preserve cash. So, there are several survival strategies which Nokia has adopted, like retrenchment, pivot, strategic alliance, and innovation. Retrenchment is cutting non core cost and unprofitable business units. Pivot is moving from declining product, that is film and phones, to growth sector like 5G, digital imaging. Strategic alliance was like partnering with others like Microsoft or HMD Global to share risk. Innovation strategy is investing in research and development for the next generation technology like 5G or artificial intelligence before competitors dominate. There is another example which I would like to state is of Kodak, the innovator's dilemma. A company fails because it refuses to cannibalize its profitable legacy business with its own new inventions. Here, during the 1888 to 1990s, Kodak dominated photography for over a century, using a razor and blades model, building on an empire of Kodak. During its expansion, it sold cameras cheaply to capture massive market share in high margin consumables like films, chemicals, and photo paper. And during the peak phase in 76, Kodak held 90% of the US film market and 85% of the camera sales. And further, ironically, Kodak engineer Steven Sasson invented the first digital camera in 1975, but management suppressed it to protect film profits. And a deep rooted film centric culture led executives to ignore warnings that digital would replace film within a decade. Certain competitors like Sony and Canon embraced digital technology very early, while the rise of smartphones eventually made even consumer digital cameras obsolete. And bankruptcy, $6.75 billion in debt, Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012. So, since emerging from the bankruptcy in year 2013, Kodak has pivoted multiple times to remain sustainable, and these strategies, it had to adopt survival and turnaround strategies in order to overcome loss. These strategies are asset divestment, focus on B2B, and chemical and pharma pivot, and brand licensing, and so on. To pay off billions in debt, Kodak sold its iconic personalized and document imaging units to Kodak Alaris pension plan, and it transitioned into a technology company for commercial printing and packaging, moving away from the consumer market. So, it focused on B2B marketing, and further leveraging its history in photochemistry, Kodak secured 765 million government loan in 2020 to produce generic drug ingredients during pandemic. So, it has focused on chemical and pharma. Then Kodak also generates significant revenue by licensing its famous brand for products ranging from consumer electronics to retro fashion apparel in markets like Korea. Unlike Kodak, its rival Fujifilm survived by aggressively diversifying into cosmetic and healthcare much earlier, using the same chemical expertise that once powered its film business. These analysis details Kodak's strategic orientation, lessons from its failure, and how it has revived. It has made efforts to revive. Fujifilm averted Kodak's fate through a radical second foundation strategy and its Vision 75 plan, which involved auditing its technologies to find new market. So they leveraged on the existing technology in order to search for new market. This led to diversification into cosmetics using antioxidants and collagen, healthcare leveraging diagnostics, imaging, and pharmaceutical, and highly functional materials like LCD films. Diversification strategy of Fujifilm, which is much beyond photography. Fujifilm could not rely solely on film and photography. They have identified their strength in chemicals, optics, and imaging technologies. Further, they expanded into medical imaging, pharmaceuticals, and regenerative medicine. Fujifilm's healthcare division is a major part of its business, producing diagnostic equipment, endoscopies, and even developing drugs for cancer. Avigan is a anti-influenza drug gained attention during COVID-19 pandemic. It has ventured into cosmetics, launching Asta Lift skincare brand. Fujifilm has leveraged its expertise in collagen nanotechnology, which was initially developed for photographic films, to create high end beauty products, showing how a deep understanding of material science could translate into opportunities in the new market. So, these are various examples through which and we can learn how an organization which has grown in a market, and when it matures, revisit its strengths, overcome its weaknesses, and find out opportunities in the market and threats which are there in the existing market in order to further redesign its strategy. So, there are at least four distinct ways through which an organization grows. First one is expansion in the organization's existing domain. For example, Ratan Tata followed this strategy in acquiring Chorus. The addition of Chorus to Tata Steel gave Ratan Tata a greater concentration in the European steel market. The second strategy is the growth through diversification into new domains. For example, Reliance, which owns such operations as Reliance Communication, Reliance Power, Reliance Fresh, uses the strategy. For this strategy emphasizes on developing new products, services, vertical integration, and conglomerate diversification. The third strategy is growth through technological development. Most large universities use increased class size as a means to expand. Federal Express has been using this strategy to expand rapidly by using computer technology to precisely track the packages from receipt to delivery. Then fourth strategy is growth through improved managerial techniques. This strategy seeks to increase efficiency of management process. Infosys has developed a large cadre of outstanding managers, which in turn has provided the impetus for growth of the firm. So, a model of organizational growth, which is best known model, was developed 1970s by Larry Greiner. Greiner studied a number of organizations and from his observations proposed that an organization's evolution is characterized by phases of prolonged and calm growth followed by periods of internal turmoil. The former is called evolution and the latter is called revolution. Each stage of evolution or growth creates its own crisis. The resolution of the crisis, however, initiates a new evolutionary phase. The evolutionary crisis process creates a five-stage model which consists of the crisis for leadership, crisis of autonomy, crisis of control, crisis of red tape, and crisis of decline. Greiner's model of organizational growth, there are five phases of growth. On the x-axis, we have age of the organization depicting young to mature organization. Y-axis, we have the size of organization, large to small. A young organization is small or a small organization may be younger, and then it moves on and there are the spikes. So, as the organization grows through creativity, it is followed through crisis of leadership. Then comes growth through direction and crisis of autonomy. Then as we move to the phase 3, there is growth through delegation and it is followed by crisis of control. The phase 4 comes with the straight line representing growth through coordination, where again there are spikes which denote the crisis of red tapeism or bureaucracy. In the fifth phase, there is a growth through collaboration, and then again there comes some crisis. So, these straight lines show evolutionary stage and the spikes exhibit revolutionary stage. So, evolution and revolution keep on coming and going. As we have discussed, there are 5 stages. One is growth through creativity, where there is crisis of leadership; growth through direction, where there is crisis of autonomy; growth through delegation, where there is crisis of control; and growth through coordination, where there is crisis of red tapeism; growth through collaboration, where there is again the crisis which emerges. So, as we move on, let us look at the various phases of organizational growth. The first phase being creativity. The first stage of organization's evolution is characterized by creativity of its founders. These founders typically devote their energies towards development of products and market. Their organization's design tend to look like the simple structure. Decision making is controlled by the owner or the manager or the top management. Communication between levels in the organization is frequent and informal. As the organization grows, it becomes difficult to manage by relying on the informal communication. The senior manager becomes overextended, then there comes a crisis of leadership, as those who run the organization no longer have the skills or interest to direct the organization successfully. Strong professional management is needed that can introduce more sophisticated management and organizational technique. The second phase, the phase 2 that is followed by creativity in direction. If the phase 2 that is followed by creativity is the phase of direction. If leadership crisis is resolved, strong leadership will have been acquired. This new leadership will formalize communication and put accounting, budgeting, inventory and other systems in place. The organization's design will become increasingly bureaucratic. Specialization will be introduced and as well as a functional structure so as to separate production and marketing activities. The new direction, however, will create a crisis of its lower level managers will become frustrated, seek greater influence in decisions that affect them. The new management, though, is reluctant to give up authority. The result is crisis of autonomy. Solution tends to lie in decentralizing decision making. Lower level managers will become very frustrated, seek greater influence in decisions that affect them. The new management is reluctant to give up authority. The result is a crisis of autonomy. Solution tends to be in decentralizing decision making. The third phase is delegation. If decisions are decentralized, the crisis of phase 2 will have been resolved. Lower level managers will now have relative autonomy to run their units. Top management will devote its energy to long run strategic planning. Internal control systems will be developed to monitor the decisions of lower level managers. Delegation, however, eventually creates a crisis of control. Lower level managers enjoy autonomy, but top managers fear that organization is going in many directions at the same time. Top management's response is to attempt to return to the centralized decision making. Centralization is viewed as a means to provide unity of direction, but this is rarely realistic. Some other means of coordination needs to be found and implemented. The control crisis is resolved by implementing staff unit to review, evaluate and control line management activities with the product groups to facilitate coordination. These coordination devices create their own problems. Line staff conflict, for example, begins to consume a great deal of time and effort. The fourth phase is coordination. Lower level employees increasingly begin to complain that they are all being overwhelmed by too many rules, regulations and control. The crisis of red tapeism, bureaucracy occurs, and unless it is resolved, it can lead to goal displacement. Then comes the final phase, that is the phase 5, which is of collaboration. In the phase 5, the solution of a red tape crisis is strong interpersonal collaboration among members. A strong culture acts as a subculture for formal controls, and the task forces and other group devices are created to perform tasks and solve the problems. The organization structure moves towards organic form, and Greiner is unclear as to what crisis will evolve out of the collaborative and organic structure. So, it might well be a return to one of the earlier crises in the model. So, while discussing the Greiner's model, we understand that success creates its own problems. As organization grows, it faces new crises. Each crisis in turn requires management to make adjustments in coordination devices, control systems, organizational design. But do organizations grow in standardized time space? Moreover, do all organizations grow in discrete stages that has been defined by Greiner? The answer to both the questions is no. And Greiner acknowledges that movement between the phases will vary both within and between organizations. Also, some organizations undoubtedly revert to the earlier stages. An increasing number of organizations, as we see in a moment, are unsuccessful in responding to a crisis. So, the result is often the beginning of organizational decline. And organizations accept a new reality during the decline phase, in spite of all the reasons managers have for favoring growth conditions. Organizations' decline is becoming a fact of life for an increasing number of managers, especially those in large organizations in established industries. For example, Ford announced that it would close down 16 out of the 42 North American manufacturing plants. In 1991, the then chairman of General Motors planned to cut 10,000 to of his 4 lakh workers. However, by the end of the year, they announced a cut of 74,000 workers. So many other companies like Boeing, AT&T, IBM followed the suit, and Boeing has cut 30,000 jobs, AT&T has cut 83,000 jobs. IBM, which never laid off workers since 1914, have cut 85,000 jobs or workers. So these companies accepted the reality and they became lean and thin. The growth was also the natural state of thing, and decline, when it occurred, was viewed as an aberration. Uh, what has then changed? We have merely ignored the reality, or we have more organizations actually entered the declining stage of their life cycle. So, when we refer to organizations' decline, we mean prolonged decrease in number of personnel. And another term that is closely aligned with organizational decline is downsizing. By downsizing, we mean to reduce the staff strength, slimming down of organizations by reducing the number of vertical levels. Downsizing is reducing the number of middle managers, widening the organization's average span of control, and pushing authorities downwards. When you hear about management reorganizing to become lean and thin, the organization is typically engaged in downsizing. So the question is why? Some organizations are forced to cut back as a result of loss of market share. Many organizations have found a declining market of their product. Deregulation has also produced a loss in the market share. For many firms in the airlines industry, the recent rush for mergers and acquisitions has created redundancies in many companies. Banks have merged, for instance. Efficiencies often dictate consolidating operations, staff personnel in functions such as legal, accounting, purchasing, and human resources. So, there is a lot of change which has occurred in the business environment. Various the local, state, and central government agencies have additional concern to worry about. A loss of taxpayer support can require cutbacks. A change in the government popularities, government policies can lead to retrenchment. Finally, the geographical areas can be hit by erosion of their economic and tax bases, which requires significant reductions or cutbacks. So, to conclude, we have discussed in this lecture to identify various reasons why organizations seek growth. We have also discussed about the 5 phase model of organizational growth proposed by Greiner, and we have also discussed about organizational decline, and finally summarize the discussion with environmental forces that might lead to organizational decline. In this course, organizational theory, structure and design, we have discussed about of or a comprehensive framework to understand how organizations function, how they adapt and succeed in a dynamic environment. This course also helps in exploring the interplay between strategy, structure, technology, culture, which offers analytical tools to design effective organizations and manage change. So, what are the important lessons that we have learned in this the entire course? This course first discusses about organizational theory and evolution, gives an overview of classical theory, bureaucracy, neoclassical, and modern theories of management. Further, it discusses about the structure and design, exploration of organizational structures, functional, divisional, matrix, network, and design options like bureaucracy and adhocracy. And then further, it has also discussed about the contextual factors, determinants of structure, analysis of how size, technology, and environment influence organization structure. Moving further, we have also discussed about organizational dynamics, where we have examined the role of culture, power, control, conflict management, and finally, we discussed about the strategic adaptation, focus on how organizations adapt to change, manage external environment with opportunities, threat, and pursue various strategies. So, overall, after going through the various modules of this course, the students can develop skills to analyze organizational effectiveness, diagnose structural problems, and implement design that fosters competitive advantage and sustainable growth.